Good job. This week's portion is Parshas Vayera. And the beginning of Parshas Vayera is known to all of us, where three men who turn out to be angels come to tell Avraham that he's going to have a child with Sarah. But we also know that Avram in last week's portion was told directly from God that Sarah was going to have a child. So it seems clearly that the purpose of this message that he was getting from the angels was not for Avram, but for Sarah to hear. And it says Sarah was in the tent, she's behind the door, the Sarah Shamas, and she hears, and what does she do? Vatitzchak Sarah Bekirba. She laughs internally, she doesn't laugh out loud. And then when God asks Avram, why did she laugh? And Avram challenges her, she says, it says Vatichachesh Sarah, Sarah denies it. And she says she didn't laugh. And Avram says, no, you laughed. So the question is, what's going on here with Sarah? We've had Sarah show actually unbelievable restraint in the past. If you think about it, the first story we have of Avram going down to Egypt, Sarah is then given over to Paro as a wife. Sarah has no speaking part. And therefore, it's hard to know exactly what Sarah was thinking or what she might have said privately, which is not recorded in the Torah. But the image that the Torah is giving us is that Sarah was willing to go along. She was able to contain herself. And the commentaries, specifically the ones which think in terms of Kabbalistic view of the Torah, say that she has the midah of gevura, of strength. And strength is not just a powerful external strength, but actually, as it's described in Pirkei Avos and Ethics of Our Fathers, as Zehu Gibor, who's considered a Gibor, who's considered strong, Hakovish Asir, so someone who conquers their inclination. So it's really restraint, it's internal strength. And that's what Sarah seems to have. She seems to be able to be stoic and accepting her fate. And that's what she does with Paro. And then afterwards, it says, when she saw that she wasn't going to have a child, she doesn't scream, she doesn't yell, she doesn't complain. She just gives Avram, her maidservant, Hagar, to have a child. But then we start seeing something which is problematic in Sarah. In which way? That when Hagar doesn't treat her well, she goes over to Avram and says, Chamasi alecha, my wrath or my anger, and some would translate it, my violent anger, is against you. Yishpat Hashem beni v'necha, God should judge between myself and you. She seems to be very angry. So here we have someone who has all this restraint, and then at a certain point, instead of being stoically accepting of her fate, and especially here, okay, so Hagar didn't treat her so well, it's not as bad as what happened before, all of a sudden now she lashes out at Avram. And then we see in this week's portion where she laughs and is not willing to accept the fact that God is giving her a child. Okay, she hears it from people she doesn't know is an angel, but you would expect a person that we think of who has tremendous emunah, bitachon, has faith and trust in God and accepting of her fate would say, yes, hopefully that will be the case. That's what she could have said. So I think the answer is understanding that, especially the way the Kabbalists understand it, is that Sarah might have been representative of the extreme midas gevura, the extreme character of strength, of repression, if you want to put it that way. Stoicism could also be seen as repression. And she represses maybe her real feelings. I guess in the ideal you could say someone who's stoic, it doesn't bother them at all. But I think maybe it's reflecting the normal human character, which is that everyone has some feelings. Everyone has issues when something bad happens, or when something good does not happen that's expected, as with Sarah. But we're able to control ourselves. And that's repression. Repression could work within certain limits, but when it's taken to an extreme, as perhaps it was with Sarah, as we saw the first couple of stories of Sarah, maybe at a certain point, we can't contain it anymore. And Sarah, when finally the straw that broke the camel's back is when Hagar treats her disrespectfully, she all of a sudden says, Chamasi alecha, like, I'm really angry with you. God should judge between you. It's a very harsh sentence, but it's understandable that she can't control the feelings that she has, that she's contained within herself all this time. And another outcome of this repression shows itself in this story in this week's parsha. What's that? That when she hears something telling her that she's going to have a child, something she probably hoped for and wished for, and she surely did all those years. She's repressed it to such a degree that she doesn't want to deal with it anymore. And that's what we always sometimes do. That we if we can't deal with something, we just forget about it completely. And therefore, she couldn't have a child until now. She, in a sense, became okay in a sense with her situation, and she was willing to accept it to the degree where she pushed it out of her mind, and she wasn't able to even think about it as a possibility anymore. So therefore, she laughed internally. She's not trying to be derisive, but she realizes inwardly, this is not going to happen. This can't possibly happen. I'm too old. That ship has sailed already. And then that also leads to the trait of denial, because you deny your feelings. So therefore, when she laughed internally, she might not have even realized it. Maybe when Avram says you laughed, she says, no, I didn't. So on the one hand, you say she's lying, but at the other hand, it's not necessarily lying. It's she's fooling herself. She's so repressed. She's repressed those feelings to such a degree that she's in a state of denial. And I think that's the lesson we can learn from that. So although many people like to learn the Torah and understand that the Avos and the Emos, the forefathers and foremothers, were all perfect, but I think maybe the Torah here is teaching us some of the negative traits which we could have, which are born out of a positive trait. The ideal, of course, is to be able to be accepting of your fate, but you have to know how to do that in balance, and that's what we all have to do in life. We have to balance that. We have to accept our fate. We have to stoically be willing to agree to whatever God throws our way. On the other hand, we have to be able to be honest with our feelings. And we have to sometimes, if instead of laughing internally, we speak it out. We tell ourselves. We don't deny it. Maybe we cry. I like to always compare this story to the one of Hannah. When Hannah is upset she doesn't have a child, she expresses it. She says she's angry. She says, and she cries out, and she complains to God. And perhaps that's the healthier way to look at it. And that's why Hannah really is, in a sense, an ideal. She's worked out these issues, whereas Sarah, at this point in her life, hasn't worked it out. And again, that's a lesson for all of us. And hopefully we take that and we realize that's the balance that we have to create in our own life. Good Shabbos.